Good day, lords and ladies, and welcome to Black Geyser, Couriers of Darkness. Me, Cornish-knight, as we take a look at this interesting cRPG, developed by Grape Ocean Technologies and published in cooperation with BV Publishing. This is a fairly good-looking cRPG. I am a fan of the cRPG genre. I'm always a big fan of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and the Pillars of Eternity franchise. I've played about an hour of this game and I'm going to give you my first thoughts about it. First of all, let's check out the settings. We have the graphics. Nice, solid resolutions, full screen options, which are always nice. Not every game comes with full screen window screen options anymore, which I find frustrating, especially if you're playing on, say, laptops where the game will not like full screen, and you can't. Like, I have been playing some games recently where you cannot manually force the game into full screen, and you've definitely missed out having that option to do it. Font size is always nice for those who have visual issues and they need larger font sizes. Vertical sync, cursor lock, which is nice, graphic settings, gameplay, English, a few languages, Dutch, Polish, and a few others. We have tooltips, tooltip delay, so it's a fairly nice range of options, not too overwhelming, but at the same time not missing things that are necessary for the game. Standard control setup allows you to change your controls, which is always very nice. Sound option, this is quite nice. You have character volume because the characters are actually voice animated, especially for major characters, which is always very pleasant. You have effect sound, music sound, and master volume, which is nice. Sometimes you don't get that, so it's pleasant to see. Then you have pause options, which allows you when the game will pause when enemies are spotted, enemies deaths. This is a nice little feature. So overall, a nice solid setting system. So what we're going to do, we are going to basically I'm going to show off the character creation and the process that goes into that, and then I will load up a game that I've been playing for about an hour, partly because I don't want to spoil the intro of the game's story to you, the viewers, because that's never fun. Plus I want to dive straight into the actual world as is. So, we go new game. Allows you to either select a pre-made character. There's a few, I'm not going to lie. You have a nice variety of races and classes, but we are going to go a new character and make one ourselves. This may take a moment or two, folks. Here we go. Sorry about that. So, first off, you have race and class, or race and sex, class, attributes, skills and spells, appearance, name and voice, and basically the finalization screen. So between the races that are being displayed here, you have human, dwarf, elf, your standard fantasy races.
Breaking rock or breaking skulls, same to me.
I do like little voiceovers they have for every race.
I am ready for battle.
Just gives them a bit of extra flavour.
Breaking rock or breaking skulls, same to me.
And you have a bit of race lore with each race, as you can see.
My blade is sure, my arrow true.
I don't particularly like that elven bit here. It's a bit too generic, but that's just me. I come from the Warhammer, like the Warhammer fantasy sort of view of elves, where they're not as sweet and innocent as you get in normal fantasy. But yes, like you have the three standard races that you find in most fantasy RPGs.
My blade is sure, my arrow true.
And then you have basically some other ones. This can probably be viewed as sort of like dark elves, if we're being honest. The race lore will be different, but it's pretty much like they have the dark skin, pale hair, like dark colour palette skin, and pale hair, which is associated with like drow or dark elves that you find in most fantasy settings. The one race which is different though is
violence will not.
this race, the Rillo, Travelers, traders, and alchemists from the Eastern Empire's Rillo are a child race of powerful Djinn called Electors. The homeland is shrouded in mystery, so few outside of Rillo themselves know much about them. What is known is that they are seekers of pleasure and experience, consummate traders, and nomadic caravaneers. Rillo are a large, physically imposing race who bear a passionate resemblance to elephants. So that's interesting. So that's a race that's very bit different. You can also, if you collect here, you see the impact playing each race has, because each race has very clear impacts
my arrow true.
On what race you play. So for example, elves can't be Templars or Shamans. They get bonuses to dexterity but penalties to physique, and they get various minuses and negatives to different resistances.
Breaking rock or breaking skulls, same to me.
As you see here, the dwarves can't. It looks like they're going with the whole fantasy approach that dwarves can't be like spellcasters, which I find a bit strange. I do like the tiny little one-handed pick. It's got like a little mining pick there, like one-handed mining pick. Then we've got humans. Can be any class, but they have a minimum supernatural ability. It's understandable. So let's go human. We'll go female man. That's not a great portrait. It's more realistic, I suppose. Let's go with that. We have your classes. This game has a fairly nice wide range of classes, all the way from your standard fighter to stuff all the way up to like necromancer, winter mage, swindler, spellweaver. Some of the more like exotic classes behave very differently.
Shall fear my spells.
And I do like it that each class has its own like voiceover change. Spellweavers are the most common form of wizards in Yerengal. They are varied as the world itself. Spellweavers focus on exploring as many of each magical disciplines as possible. Thus, no two spellweavers are the same. So they're basically your standard sort of mage. You have necromancers, shamans, thieves, all kinds of interesting things.
I reign.
So as you can see, it's basically each class has different abilities. You can open up the stats. This is one thing I will say that I like about this. It's nice that when you put on the description, all your stuff is broken down and described to you what each thing does to your eventual build. So it allows you to understand where things are coming from, which not every RPG does, to be honest. And it's a good way of keeping track of what exactly you're picking. I think we'll go with just your standard. Where is the fighter? We've got standard fighter, which is fine. And here to the attributes. They have a nice breakdown telling you exactly what they do. Your standard sort of fare for like a cRPG or RPG, like heavy RPG game. But some games do it much better than others. This one does it quite well. It tells you exactly what your stats do in a straightforward and concise way. So let's just do, we're just going to do, just for now, we'll just allocate our points to move on. Resistances, the fact that you can actually pick which resistances are like affected early on is always nice. So let's get it going with that and just say across the board, 5 points of resistance across the board for everything. Now we get to the skills and ability, or skills and spells technically. And it's nice here that you can see your stats for your character broken down once again, so you see everything that goes into it. So you have general skills in this, which are basically bargaining and persuasion, learning and research, and brewing and dyeing. They are very much like the name suggests, which is, for example, bargaining and persuasion offers the ability to manipulate the character of Yerengal and to do your bidding. Points in this skill will help you reach favourable prices with vendors and unlock more options in the dialogue screen. So basically, it's very similar to games sort of like, like Baldur's Gate or Pillars of Eternity, where like your charisma and your prowess at speechcraft get different results. You have learning and research offers the ability to read various text scrolls and recipe scrolls that can be cast or recorded into spell books, while recipes can be learned and added to the compendium. Basically, it's your sort of, if you're going down the magic route, this is the class you sort of want to go down. Then you've got brewing and drying, which is like your alchemy. class, that's what you do. For example, in this game, because I doubt I'll get a chance to show it off, but in this game, for example, when you're brewing something, you have to dry it beforehand. You have to prep the ingredients before you can use them, which is a nice little feature that I think more games should have. I like to have more depth when it comes to my crafting systems, especially in cRPGs. It was one of the things that I liked about Pillars of Eternity. Like, for example, you could make food, and the food actually had really good benefits. And you would eat food before going into different combats to give your characters different buffs, which is something that not every game does. Right, so let's get... The game's going to recommend that we put it into Bargaining Persuasion, which is fine with me. Then you have class-specific skills, which basically boost certain stats. I'm going to probably go just straight up Seasoned Warrior, which will give us a bonus to basically help us with our in combat skills. So it's very nice. Yes, here we go. Each point of charisma increases the skill by that. And then you can see various things feed into it. So charisma, physique feeds into it. Having general point in the skill warrior class as a whole increases it. Basically adds additional dialogue choices themed around basically playing the warrior class. So when we have this, it allows us to have more RP material produced from our class. So when we engage with dialogue with characters outside of our class, or I should say in general, this will allow us to role play a seasoned warrior or that kind of thing. You have other ones that are broken down, like force locks and doors, which basically helps you break open containers if you can't lockpick them. Command companions basically gives you buffs with that, which will allow you to basically you can read it in the description yourself. It's very useful to buff party control and leadership. And then you have outdoor survival, health regained while resting outdoors. So a general purpose like healing skill when you're resting if you don't want to use up your supplies as much. Then you have like weapon skills down here. Let's see what the game suggests for us to do. They're putting it in a broad range, but like this deliberately impacts the percentage you have to basically hit things with. Like if you want to go, for example, if you want to be really good with say long blades, and you put them all into long blades, it really boosts how effective with a weapon that you are. And this is something to keep aware of in my experience while playing this game, is that you don't want to spread your points too far across too many weapon types. You want to pick a couple of weapon types that you like the look of. When I was playing my test character, I had basically 3. I had large blades, battle axes, and spears and halberds, and I managed to get a fairly good progress on them, because as you can see here, let's see. Large blades deal mostly slashing damage alongside a bit of pulse and blow. Each point of this on large blades increases their skill by 6.6%. Basically, this is how good you are with the weapon and your likelihood to hit. So it's one of those things where if you don't invest in it, you're not going to get a good return. And then you have initiates and initial spells that your character can have. And you can rank them up as you go through. Like there's multiple classes you can have for each spell. So for example, if we go Berserker and we go level 2, it grants bonuses based on that. But let's go with that. We'll go Challenging Howl and we'll go Vigilance. Have a nice couple of range of abilities. So far so good. The character has character creation is rather in-depth, gives a nice breakdown of how to build a character, which is always good in the cRPGs or any kind of RPG system in general. And then you have your character portrait here, which you can basically change the hairstyle. You can change major skin color, minor skin colors, and all this kind of thing. What colors you want in general. I suppose that's probably going to be for just like... can we get back out of this? Default, yeah. It's probably going to be like what clothing. Normally when they do these kind of things, it's basically what your character's clothing colors will be. Then you have skin color, eye color, hair color, which it does play into the character. One thing I would wish is that they have basically a description of like what your character in game will look like, not the profile picture, but the actual sort of model that you will be moving around, your avatar model that you'll be moving around. It'd be nice to see what the overall look of your character would be during this process, because from experience, it can always be a bit jarring when you make a character look a certain way and then you get into the game and it doesn't look like that, or it doesn't work as well as you'd hoped. Pillars of Eternity is a good example. They allow you to have a much more wide view of what your character will look like before you complete the game, in case you want to do physical changes. Baldur's Gate 3, the latest Baldur's Gate game, also does it. But here we go. Let's pick a portrait. This is one thing I will say about the game. I don't think there's enough portraits. Because this is all the female portraits, and then if we take off sex, we see all the male portraits, there is not a lot. I know this looks like a lot, but if you remember, you're only playing with half of this. So humans have 4. Sorry, not 4. Well, so like 6. Most races tend to have between, and I think they have between about 5 and 6 portraits, which isn't particularly large. And I'm not a fan of a lot of them. Some of them just not very attractive. It's not so bad with the female portraits. The male ones, on the other hand, I am not a fan. There's just some that do not look particularly great. Or I can't really see myself playing them. It's like this one here. Or this one here. They don't have a lot of character to them. Maybe if they're not done to the right scale, but I just think they could have maybe invested in having a few more character portraits of different types. But let's just pick a random one here, and we'll go with just her. See, this is the thing that's strange, is that you have the portrait of her face there, but when you put it up here on your character profile, it goes into much more, it expands a lot more, which is a bit strange, I find, because you pick a character based on this, and then you see the whole picture. It's like this person here, we have them like that, or like this. You see a lot more detail once you pick them, so I always find it slightly a bit odd. I always think they should have this image there, so you see the whole picture. But I suppose it's to save space. So we're going to go name and voice. Here you go. You have a nice suggestion of names. Change what your voice sounds like. You have 5 types, basically.
Your instructions. Speak your mind.
You have basically 5 types. Similar to most RPGs. You also have a difficulty grading system with a very basic breakdown of what it does. I am going to say this, I would think that the game should have, when you pick a difficulty setting, they have enough space here to have a drop-down menu which explains what exactly the difficulty encompasses. So if we go, for example, veteran, I want to see what that has on, for example, enemy hit chance or enemy health. It should say stuff like, or it could say stuff like plus 20% health to enemies, plus 10 points to hit chance or something like this. So it gives you a breakdown of what the difficulty entails. It just doesn't give you a bit of flavor text. So you have a lot of experience with role-playing games. Well, that's great. I have a lot of experience with role-playing games, but that doesn't really tell me what this difficulty does. And here you have the physique and all your attributes, resistances, general skills, class skills, all this kind of thing here. And it's a nice, solid character sheet breakdown. It tells you exactly what you need to know, even going into your appearance, which is nice. And so this is the character creation. I know we have spent a bit of time on the character creation, almost 20 minutes, but this is one of the things that's important for games like this. So it helps you understand what you're getting into. And now we're going to be done with this. I will basically put a quick cut in and we'll go into the right gameplay. I've been playing for about an hour at this point. I don't want to spoil the main story, so I wanted to miss out the beginning of the game, and I shall see you all in a second. And here we are, folks. We're about an hour or so, maybe a bit more into the game. We're still playing. The game is still giving us the tutorial, as it were. So you can see up here. While having one of your companions selected, you can use the interact button to initiate a conversation with them. You can learn more about their backgrounds, progress their quests, and make them leave your group this way. So if we wanted to, we could basically engage by talking to them like this, and that's what the game wants us to do. We'll get to that in a second. I don't want to spend too much stuff. I don't want too much of the main story. This is one of the things with cRPGs. which is that if I sew too much off, it basically spoils the game for people that are playing. So let's get straight into like combat. Right, so there's a wolf running around this way. We should probably have been able to run up that slope, to be honest. Come on. And that's like it's if you've played any cRPG before, this kind of style of combat is quite familiar. If you've definitely played Pillars of Eternity, this style of combat is very much familiar to you. It's very, very, very similar. I'm not going to lie. To the extent where it's like I don't know how all my training from basically playing similar games kicks in. Now, the world, if you have come from games, I'm going to use this equivalent title a lot in describing this game, but it's the one that is the most well known recently for the franchise. Because Pillars of Eternity is like a benchmark cRPG. So, if you've come from such a title, you should be familiar with the general how the game progresses.
What do you need?
It's very much like that. So, we want to just check out stuff like the look of the world, which is always very nice. See if there's anything in particular. My experience so far is a few things. The problem with comparing a game like this to Pillars of Eternity is Pillars of Eternity both took a long time to make, and they used a lot of like hand-drawn aesthetic for a lot of the background art. So when you can compare a title like this to that, it's always a bit disingenuous. So far, I think this is a pretty solid cRPG. I do have some gripes with it. I'm not going to lie. Some of the in-world artifacts, when I show some of them off, just look a bit lacking. Like things like this, like they just sort of stand out to me as. You have like you have some hand-drawn stuff, and then you have very clearly 3D assets in the world, which in and of themselves isn't a problem, but it's not so much an issue here. But there's an earlier map that I won't spoil for the players, where this looks nice, and then you have an earlier map I was on where you had a lot of these sort of 3D effects, and it came across looking a bit underwhelming, if I'm being honest. Ooh, goblins.
Here we go.
So let's go with that. One thing I would like, that I would say this game does need to a certain extent, is that unlike other cRPGs that I have played, there's no sort of counter showing you like when your character's turn is, your character just swings, or as much as I can tell. So I would like to have that as well in the game, just showing you like how many seconds you have until it's your turn. Overall, it's a solid cRPG. I won't spoil the story, but from what I've seen, it follows rather standard sort of fantasy storytelling. It's like there is a big bad, you are chosen to basically confront it, that kind of thing, or at least you are sort of forced by circumstance into confronting it. There's nothing particularly outstanding, I think, so far in the story that I've seen, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. And let's see if I can solve some of the dialogue, because a lot of the dialogue in this game is narrated, especially major story points. Good day to you, kind sirs. Are you on the way to Isilbright? I warrant I wish a wise choice given the circumstances. Okay, so it seems that not every character is narrated, especially the character at the beginning of the game were, which was nice. And basically it's telling you about stuff that's going on in the world. So let's just quickly skip this, because I don't want to basically spoil it for people that want to have a look at it. This is one of the things with cRPGs in my experience, is that you really do not want, if you're trying to basically get people invested, you don't want to basically spoil the narrative, so I won't do that with this review. All I will say is that it seems that like the world setting is nice. The things that are going on in the world seem impactful. Like it's a solid cRPG. Combat is straightforward and responsive. I will say that I'm not a fan of a lot of the. I will say I'm not a fan of a lot of the character animations. Some of them are especially a bit janky when it comes to walking. As you can see here, like when your character runs, there's no sort of like weight to the running. I will say, it's like they can sort of like they do slide a bit. I also would like it if there was an option to like sheathe your weapon, because like there's none to put your weapon away. So like if you have a weapon out, it stays out unless you basically switch to something else, which is not something I sometimes like having the ability to have characters that have their weapons like not drawn. One other thing I will say is that when it comes to inventory space, though they've given every character individual inventory space, it would also be nice if you could basically just send it to your party from that screen rather than having to individually click over the characters. It saves a little bit of time in my experience. But yeah, like this is Black Geyser. I know I haven't sold off a lot of the gameplay because like a lot of the fighting elements of the gameplay, but that's because I don't want to spoil the story, because cRPGs tend to be very reliant on the narrative of a game. All I can say is that the game's narrative is good. It's nothing sort of like groundbreaking, but at the same time, it's a good narrative. Some of the animations could be better, like the running animations for some of the characters, especially if you're a human that's using a sword and a shield. I think I have that running around there.
On my way.
You run a bit strangely with it, which just is a bit odd to look at.
Why not?
Besides that, it's a good game, like a very solid cRPG, I have to say. But then again, I am a fan of such titles as Pillars of Eternity. I would say though that this doesn't really break any modes. If I was going to say one thing about this title, it feels very much like a Pillars of Eternity sort of inspired title. It has similar sort of UI setup to Pillars of Eternity. And the thing is, that's understandable. Like such cRPGs are really quite sort of groundbreaking in their way. So it's nice to see a game that has similar features built in, but at the same time, I would like to see a bit of like innovation. Like I haven't dived deep enough in the game because obviously cRPGs take a very long time to play. If that was one of my few comments I would say about them, I would say that cRPGs are very much something that you have to invest time into. So it's one of these things. Let's do a character level up so I can show off the level up system. Let's go with Helgahan to show it off. So he is a fighter like you, and this is how the characters level up, which is that you can put points into your core abilities, your class skills, and then like your weapon stuff. So all characters level up the same way, which is nice. I wish we had a spellcaster to show off such things, but we don't seem to have one yet in the party, but I guess we will get one soon.
Yeah.
Overall, I would say that if you like cRPGs, this is definitely a game to have a look at. But I would also say that if you go into it expecting it to be like the same quality as like Pillars of Eternity series or Baldur's Gate, you might be slightly disappointed. It's a solid cRPG. So it might be worth your time to have a look at it. I will put a link in the description below if you want to check it out. But yes, this has been Black Geyser. It's Black Geyser. That is actually one other thing I will say. It's like I'm just trying to remember the name of the title. I just been calling it Black Geyser. Yes, Black Geyser, the Couriers of Darkness, I believe. Yeah, Black Geyser, Couriers of Darkness. It's a nice title. I must say, I do love the artwork they have done. A lot of the hand-drawn artwork for this game is very pretty. as well as the iconography and all the stuff they developed. The lore of this game is really nice. This is the one thing I will say, is that one of the things that really sells cRPGs is the background lore and the narrative of the game, both of which have been seemingly done very well. So if you're into a game that has a good narrative, like a good sort of background and what seems to be an interesting narrative, you may want to check this out. But I will say this is only after I've only played about a couple of hours or so, maybe like an hour or so of this, just to sort of get a feel of how the game works. But I've been Cornish-knight. This has been Black Geyser, Couriers of Darkness, and I shall see you all again next time. Goodbye, lords and ladies.